Hiya folks, this is Skull, and I'm joined here today by my cynical friend here, Bones. How you doing, Bones?
I'm doing great, Skull.
Last episode, we gave our overall views and thoughts about Solo, and kind of our thoughts of why it just didn't work as a movie. Now, we're going to go further. We're going to look at why the Star Wars movies, under Kathleen Kennedy and under Disney management, are not working with the fandom, and why they are constantly losing money the more movies were going in. Bones, what do you think that is?
I think it's because of KK, but it's more than just Kathleen Kennedy. And it's a belief, obviously, in the socialist idea. And this has been going on for 8 years. They're trying to cram it down our throats every chance they get. But let's look at KK real quick. And I talked before, last one, about the perfect storm and how and why she was hired. Obviously, it was because of the feminist atmosphere that was going on. They wanted to get a woman at the helm. But it's more than that. A lot of people don't realize that Bob Iger, at one point, around 2012, was talking about running for president. Bob Iger, of course, being the CEO and president of Disney Films, or of Disney itself. And so I think this was part of their objective, part of their agenda, to look more progressive and more socialist. So again, there's that part of the perfect storm. But there's also, once Kennedy is hired, and she's surrounded, of course, by the yes men, and she's decided that she wants to break through that glass ceiling, and they all want to help her do that, supposedly. I really don't know. I think ultimately her goal is not only just getting through that glass ceiling, but defeating Lucas. She wants to be better than Lucas. She's really pushing to get all these movies out when they don't really have to. I think because, Lucas made at least 6 movies, at least about Star Wars.
Yeah, he made 6 movies, and he had direct involvement with the Clone Wars TV series, which went on for several years. So you could say 7 movies about Star Wars.
So 7 movies. What are we up to with Kathleen Kennedy at this point?
We're up to 4. We have The Force Awakens, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, and Solo.
Plus Rebels.
Plus Rebels, yeah.
All right, so she has a few more to go. And I think that's one of her goals. The other goal, of course, is breaking through the glass ceiling. But I think there's a secret goal as well. And it's right along with the defeat of Lucas. I think she wants Bob Iger's job. And I think she is not going to be content until she is ruling all of the Disney Corporation. And clearly this is obviously the feminist agenda anyway. They feel that the feminists can do it better.
She wants to become the queen bee.
Totally. That's what it is. She's not really... People think that why is she doing this about Star Wars? She's not thinking about Star Wars. She's thinking about her career and her legacy. And her legacy is to ultimately run everything. And watch out, Bob Iger. And of course, Bob Iger is no longer wanting to be president, supposedly. Personally, I don't think he could make it anyway. But I think this is really the reason why the Lucas films is going down the toilet, is because it's not about Star Wars anymore. It's about Kathleen Kennedy and her own secret agenda to ultimately rule the kingdom, I guess so.
The kingdom of Disney, the kingdom of the mouse.
And I think at this point, do you want to do a comparison of movies?
Oh, yes. Let's discuss the true genesis of Disney, and by extension, Kathleen Kennedy's socialist ideas that have infiltrated Star Wars, have turned them into a propaganda platform for their ideas. It was not The Force Awakens that started all this. No, it was a movie that came out earlier in the year of 2015, directed by Brad Bird, who did The Incredibles, who did The Iron Giants. It was called Tomorrowland. Basically, the leftist version of Atlas Shrugged. I will give a brief overview of what the story was about. Basically, you had Tomorrowland. It was this alternate dimension on Earth where the best and the brightest went there. They had centuries of technological gap ahead of the human race. By the time that the story starts in the 60s, they already had flying cars. They had robots that were effectively able to turn matter into anything they wanted. They could turn air into metal. And then 50 years later, they're even further in their technology in the present day. They have jetpacks and such like that. And they have the ability to use tachyon particles to predict the future, to see the future and such like that. And because of this, they were obviously the most genius of the members. It was a very small population. It was its own separate Earth. There was no problems that you might see with our Earth, with our population, such like that. And their entire system depended entirely on the production of robots. Now, the reason why I bring up Atlas Shrugged is because in that movie, that movie and the book series of Atlas Shrugged, you had an overbearing government that forced tychos of industry, scientists, inventors to flee to a secluded part of the world and formulate their own nation. They are doing the same thing here where they seclude themselves from the rest of the world in their own little bubble. Then they go out of their way to start recruiting other geniuses to further their own technological advances.
But in Atlas Shrugged, they were forced to go there. Their businesses were going to be taken over by the government or shut down. And then, so that was the difference with Atlas Shrugged, is that they were forced out. In this case, it's this socialist utopia, and who are the people that they're targeting? They're all children. Now, where do we see that?
Communism. Lenin specifically said, the children are the future. They are easier to brainwash, and they're easier to control.
Very similar said by Hitler as well, with the Hitler Youth.
Yes.
So that being the case, they've already established the premise of a utopian society. Now, in the last one we talked about that there is possibly this deep state that's inside Hollywood. And it's not the deep state that is what you've been hearing. I think it's a subversive state. They're trying to get out a message. They realize now that they've been immersed in socialism for so long. They know it's a failure, and they want people to see it. And the only way to get it out there is, well, obviously through their artwork. And in this case, Tomorrowland, it has small messages that really tell you that this is a failure. It's a warning.
And ultimately, in Tomorrowland, these come in two different examples, and we're going to directly compare them to the character of Leet in Solo. In the last episode, we discussed how Leet was blindly following her cause, blindly following the dream of freeing all the droids, and by ignoring the danger, she almost gets herself killed. Actually, no, she does get herself killed.
3 times.
3 times, that's correct.
And she's a robot, a mind-numbed robot, very similar to what you would, I hate to say the word, the social justice warriors of the day. They're just socialists, but they are all mind-numbed robots.
Yep.
And you've seen this similar attitude when it was under Obama. When Obama was elected, people around him, especially the press corps, they worshiped this man. And ultimately it has come out that Obama and his team realized that they could use these people. They would go in and they would just give them whatever information. They knew that the press corps would not fact check it, and they would just regurgitate it to the masses, and they didn't care that it was a lie. And so that's what we're seeing here. And we're seeing that as the mind-numb robots. Well, that's what Leet is, the 1337.
And ultimately, Leet's origins, I feel, come from this movie. Because there's a very similar symbolic scene that happens towards the middle of the movie where the character of Casey Newton, who is our protagonist in the movie, she gets the badge that's basically a virtual reality device. She's able to see Tomorrowland, but because it's only virtual reality, it's not real. So she keeps running into things, she bumps into walls, falls downstairs and such. She finally gets to a field where there's no obstacles, no nothing around, and she activates the pin, and she's in Tomorrowland again. Eventually, after exploring the city, she comes up to a rocket ship, she wants to get onto that rocket ship, and then she's right in the middle of a swamp. She realizes she's in the swamp, she's wading through it, she doesn't care. She wants to get on that rocket ship, and at the end of the day, she almost drowns, and the dream just fades away at the end of the day.
That is the failure of communism, the failure of socialism, the failure of the idea.
Ultimately, yes. It's because it is a dream that cannot be achieved. And this is reflected in the second example in Tomorrowland with the villain Nix, played by Hugh Laurie. Now, Nix is kind of the governor of Tomorrowland, And I'm going to warn you, folks, these plot points from the movie are incredibly confusing. Basically, George Clooney's character created a tachyon time reader, basically. It allowed them to see all the potential futures, look in the future, and see what would happen. Now, in the movie, Nix explains why Tomorrowland is not bringing other people in. It's because the end of the world is coming, and Hugh Laurie, Nix, explains that he saw this, he tried to tell the world, hey, your world is coming to an end, and he's exasperated by the fact that no one listens. However, what he doesn't understand, and George Clooney and Casey Newton bring up the point that he created a self-fulfilling prophecy by putting in the idea that the human race is doomed, and there's really nothing we can do about it. The human race is doomed. And because they have no hope that they can escape it, they don't take the steps to escape the incoming doom that is brought upon them.
Do you see the symbolism here? The fact that he can insert a vision into people's heads. Most people would call that propaganda. This vision is being crammed down our throats, and here they are admitting to it. Now, why in the world would they admit to it? Because I think this is part of that deep state.
And here's the other thing about this scene that's very telling about the socialists. When confronted by the fact that he's created a self-fulfilling prophecy, Nix denies it. He states that there's nothing wrong with what he said, there's nothing wrong with the vision, there's nothing wrong with the idea, it's just that the people on Earth are idiots, that they took the information and they misunderstood it. It's their fault, it's not the idea, even though it's the idea that is flawed, and because it's flawed, it doesn't work.
Right. He takes the side of that he's the victim. You saw this a lot under Obama. Anytime that there was something that came out that was in his administration, it was always him versus his own administration, like the government was against him. And people bought into this. And that's the same deal here. It's always deflect, act like you're the victim. And then what would be the next one?
We even see this in Star Wars, for example, with Kathleen Kennedy saying that if you don't like the movies, you are a sexist, a bigot, you're generally an angry white man.
Right.
Even though it's all the fan base that's turned against her. It's not just the white guys, it's everybody. Because at the end of the day, your movies suck.
I think we were talking about Lenin at one point. One of the things that makes communism work is that you need slaves. You need sort of mind-numb slaves. And in this case, obviously, with the Tomorrowland, they had what? The robot slaves?
Yep.
So there's your labor. But how in the world did this Tomorrowland get created? Poof, there it is.
They don't explain it. In Atlas Shrugged, it's clearly explained that these tycoons and these inventors brought their resources over, and they built it up over the course of like 20 years. In this situation, they don't explain it at all. They hint at its origins with 4 inventors: Edison, Newton, Jules Verne, and Eiffel, the man who made the Eiffel Tower. But that's it. They don't go into any other explanation. They don't explain how they found this alternate reality. They don't explain how they built it or how they got this massive technological gap in less than 50 years.
So you have an elitist group of people. They go and they create this, isolationist type world. They don't share any technology, Thanos. You're seeing a recurring theme in a lot of these Disney movies. And this one, go watch this one. And you will see the recurring theme that is Thanos, who has the Infinity Gauntlet, and he wants to kill half the population. And Skull was the one that brought this to me. He could have just used the gauntlet to fix everything.
He could have made infinite resources, or given everybody the ability to move to other planets, or create habitable planets, for that matter.
What about Black Panther? Again, another isolationist, elitist, controlled, and also kept away from the rest of society, secret. And what made it work was that they had a resource. This time they told you about the resource. It was a meteorite.
It was vibranium.
And so at least at this point, we kind of have an understanding. But again, here's a recurring theme. This utopian dream with only the elites there. They hold all the technology, and they keep the rest of the masses at bay.
Hell, even the ending to both Black Panther and Tomorrowland is very similar. After they kill Nix in Tomorrowland and they destroy his dream, they reestablish a new dream by rebuilding Tomorrowland and then sending out androids to begin recruiting people to come to Tomorrowland again. In the case of Black Panther, after they take out Killmonger and such, Wakanda exits its isolationist state and starts spreading its technology around the world. We even have a scene where Black Panther lands in the middle of I don't know, it's like a Detroit ghetto or a Chicago ghetto, even though Africa needs your help more than them, dude.
Right, good point.
You've got people who are legitimately starving in your own continent, your own neighbors.
Dying horribly.
Go help them before you come over and help the folks here in America.
We talked about the socialist tricks as well. And obviously one of the tricks is that, look, you can't really sell socialism because in order to have socialism, number one, everybody has to work. So essentially you're a slave to the system. You are part of the collective. You're not that important, and that you have to sacrifice for the idea. And if it requires your death, then you need to die. Nobody owns any property. There is no religion. You've seen the collapse of the Soviet Union and why none of this works, because there's no incentive to work. And so in order to sell socialism, they have to lie. And what they are, Kathleen Kennedy, in this case, as well as Bob Iger, are snake oil salesmen. All socialists are snake oil salesmen. And what they are selling is the reverse of what their true agenda is. And so if they've done something illegal, they'll say the other guy did that. They'll say they did it illegal. They'll try to convince everybody through the media that it was the other guy that did it, even though more likely it was them. If you ever see them talk the loudest about somebody else doing it, guaranteed it's a socialist trick. And where do we see a lot of these socialist tricks was in the trailers of, let's say, The Force Awakens.
It focused entirely on Finn for the most part. And almost everybody else in the movie, they got their scenes, they spoke a few lines, but the main focus was about Finn. Everyone went to the movie to see Finn.
Finn the Jedi. I for sure thought he was going to be a Jedi.
Finn the Stormtrooper Jedi. He's
even better, yeah.
Yeah, he was going to be our new Kyle Katarn. But, yeah.
So obviously we get to the movie. What do we see? We see Finn as a buffoon. He's not even played him an American, obviously, which is another thing to get into later. But then you see a lot of Han and Chewie, which incidentally, hearkening back to Solo, all we had to see, we didn't need to see anything other than Han and Chewie, and people cheered when they came in. So it tells you right there, you don't need a whole lot of other story going on around Han and Chewie. You just need Han and Chewie.
Just have them doing stuff.
But when you finally got there, what you got was Rey, the perfect being. And the thing with socialism is that it's not the idea that's flawed. It's the people that initiate the idea or control it. And what they're always looking for is the universe's super being. They want a Kwisatz Haderach out of Dune. They want that super person, and that's what Rey is. Basically, the Ubermensch. She is the Ubermensch, and she has no flaws. She's perfect at everything. She is the perfect example of not just feminism, but socialism. And she would be the ultimate leader. And of course, we know that that's flawed. People were completely bored with it. They had hidden their message in their trailers. They had hidden it in the movie, and then they let it loose. And it failed. Well, and see, here's the deal. People think, well, it didn't fail. It made billions of dollars. Yeah, but think about this, guys. Movie by movie by movie, from The Force Awakens to Solo, we've seen a massive drop in not only financial gain with the box office, with the toys, with the Blu-ray sales, with the books, with the comics, with all the tie-in things. We've also seen it critically. I don't even need to mention the Rotten Tomatoes score of The Last Jedi, do I? Or the fact that China has basically kicked out The Last Jedi and Solo almost immediately upon them entering country. When you mentioned the toys, those were done under a contract with Hasbro, and Hasbro had to continue to make those toys because they were buying the lease to that, or they were leasing the toy. They're releasing it to them. The thing is, they couldn't get out of that contract if the toy sales went bad, went bellied up. And also, it was a huge amount of money that they had to pay for it. They did the same trick to all the theaters as well. They had to pay a huge amount of money. And if the movie didn't show up in the theater the amount of times it was supposed to, then they'd have to pay a penalty on that. So a lot of smaller movie theaters didn't go with the Star Wars movie because they couldn't afford it. This was bully tactics. Again, socialism. They think like bullies. They are bullies because they know that their message does not resonate, and they have to force feed people this message.
And so ultimately, when it comes down to it, the biggest reason why Star Wars is failing is because of the policies of Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy. If you get rid of those two things, you get rid of their yes men, you get rid of their stooges, and you insert people who know how to tell good stories, I guarantee you we will get the Star Wars we wanted.
Get people that aren't socialists, get people that love Star Wars to do these stories.
And you will get the great Star Wars we all grew up with. Well, I think that more or less wraps it up. What do you think, Bones?
I think we're pretty good, Skull.
All right. Thank you for coming on, Bones.
Thank you, folks.
All right, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.